Hi, today we're going to be looking at how we approach the essay, and specifically we're looking at research questions. Initially, you start looking at all different research connected to your topic, and you realize that there's so much that you can say. You kind of get lost and overwhelmed by all the different possibilities that your research and your essay might take. Here, what you really need is a roadmap, something that can guide you through all this clutter of information in a specific direction. This is your research question. Quite simply, this is a question you're going to address in your research project. But more importantly, it's the engine that drives your research. It governs all the decisions that you're going to make by giving you focus and direction in what you need to write and what you need to find out. Now, there's certain criteria that we have to meet when making our research question. It has to be clear, focused, and arguable. But what does this mean? In order for it to be clear, it has to allow the reader to understand the nature of your research. So, are you exploring a cause and effect relationship? Are you examining a method? Are you considering the impacts of different things on a larger system? All this should be clear from the research that you're doing. Are you addressing a correlation, for example? And also, it must direct your research in a specific direction. You have to clearly know which steps you're taking and which direction you're moving in based on your question. So, let's look at this example. How does violence affect people? This isn't very clear because it's too vague and too broad. I don't understand exactly what the nature of this research is. Are we talking about the psychological effects? Are we talking about the physical effects? Are we talking about the effects of the people who have violence done to them, or the effects of people doing violence? So this is not clear at all. It doesn't meet our criteria. However, this question, to what extent does viewing violent acts on TV influence the likelihood of a person committing violent acts? Now, this is clear. I do understand the nature of the research. I know it's going to be exploring the correlation between watching violence and committing violence. I know it's going to be looking at the effects of violence in a specific way, the violence that we see on TV, not the experience of violence in general. So here, this question would be clear. Next, to be focused, we need to have our question be specific enough to allow us to explore our topic within the scope of a task. What do I mean by scope of the task? Well, basically, this is, can I answer my question in the time that I've been given? And can I answer it within the word limit of the essay? Let's look at this example. How is religion presented in literature? This is far too broad and far too vague. What literature are we talking about? What religion are we talking about? At what time, in what place? This you could write endless essays about, thousands and thousands of essays that are hundreds of pages long, and you'd never be able to get towards a suitable or reasonable answer. Therefore, it's not focused enough for me to answer within the time I'm given to write my essay or within the word limit that I have. However, if we look at this one, how effectively does Yann Martel explore the theme of religion in his novel The Life of Pi? This is focused. It's specific enough that I can answer it within the time that I have and within the word limit. It's not endless. Finally, we need our question to be arguable. This means that it's open enough that we can evaluate, analyze, and develop a reasoned argument. It also means that there's not an obvious answer to what we're trying to express. We're trying to contribute towards a community discussion, an academic discussion about a specific topic. This means that we're giving perspective, we're giving insight. We're not pointing at facts and obvious things. For example, if we look at this, what acquisitions did the company Apple complete between the years of 2014 and 2018? This is not arguable. The reason why is because there's a specific answer for this. We can list all of those acquisitions, and it wouldn't really tell us anything new, anything different. We wouldn't be arguing anything. We'd just be pointing at the obvious. However, if we look at this one, To what extent was Apple Inc.'s acquisition of Beats Electronics LLC an effective growth strategy? You see this, you can take a stance. Therefore, you can say it was a very effective growth strategy for these reasons, which require you to analyze and evaluate and create an argument. It also isn't an obvious answer that you can just point at or look at on the internet. So these are our three main criteria. Your research question must be clear, focused, and arguable. Beyond that, there's some tools that we can use in order to do this. Most specifically are question starters. The beginning of a question determines the ways that we have to approach that question. For example, if I start a question with the word why, I know that you're going to approach it by thinking about reasons. However, if I begin a question with the word how, you're going to have to approach it, the question based on methods and tools. One of the best question starters that we can use in our essays is to what extent. The reason for this is because it allows us to demonstrate our knowledge from multiple perspectives. We can really demonstrate what we understand from the scope of a topic. So we can find an issue and we can take a stance. To what extent was something effective? We can say it's not effective for this, however it might be effective for this. And you get to sort of include multiple perspectives in your argument, which really shows clarity of thought and understanding and in-depth knowledge about what you're doing. So always think about the question starters and consider using the starter to what extent. Now there are specific steps that we can take when we're trying to come up with a good research question. We know the criteria, we know the sort of tools that we have, but exactly what steps and processes do we go through in order to arrive at a really strong research question? Well, the first thing you want to do is to choose your subject area. From what discipline are you going to be researching a topic? Are you interested in the arts? Are you interested in the sciences? Are you interested in history, or are you interested in maths? Those two different subjects are going to require different types of research, different types of inquiry, different approaches towards your essay. Once you do this, within your research area, let's say you choose English, language and literature, you need to choose your topic. Of course, within language and literature, it's extremely broad, so we need to know, well, exactly what sort of thing are we going to be looking at? Is it a style of literature? Is it a particular text? Is it a particular genre? All these different things. Now, once we have that, we can suggest a possible question. Now I know exactly what I want to explore. I know the topic I want to explore. I sort of know why I want to explore it, and I have a question. So I would write my first question. Of course, I would brainstorm several questions at this stage also. Once you have that, you can evaluate your question. You can measure it against the criteria that we've talked about. Is it clear? Is it focused? Is it arguable? Then you can restate your question in order to make sure that your question meets that criteria. After that, you can discuss it with a trusted authority. This might be a teacher, it might be a peer, it might be a supervisor. It's somebody who can give you some feedback to make sure that you're moving in the right direction. A good strategy at this point would be to ask your authority figure, what is the nature of my research based on this question? Now, if you intend to explore a cause and effect relationship, and the person reads your question and says, well, you're going to be discussing the impacts of X on Y, maybe you've not been specific enough. It's kind of specific, but you haven't really demonstrated the cause and effect relationship exactly. So maybe that might need you to refine your question. Once you've done that, you reflect on your question. Is it as strong as it can be? Have you achieved all the goals that you wanted to? So that's your research question in a nutshell. It's pretty much the engine behind everything that you do. It drives your research moving forward. So there's some things to remember. Make sure it is clear, focused and arguable, and use some of the tools. Think about the question starters and think about perhaps using to what extent as your question.